Hey everyone, this is my pool plan video in DFFOO Global, and in this video I'll be covering my pool plan for the upcoming arc where Tifa, FRBT will be synergy. You can refer to the cropped infographic on the left hand side of the slide, which was derived from the thewereotter's global forecast, and I'll also be including a link to the full forecast in the video description as well in case you are interested. Specifically, these events are the new incoming Spiritus World of Illusion Brothers, Llyud's Lost Chapters, and the raid event featuring Faris and possibly Ardyn's FR. Firstly, a look back into how I did in the last arc, which was Yuri's FRBT arc. This was the arc that I primarily intended to save my resources because at that point in the game I found myself having a bottleneck in terms of high power stones. Not forgetting, we did actually get one free multi-draw for every banner in the arc. So the good thing is in Yuri's arc, the free multi-draw actually gave me one free LD, which I was actually missing at that point in the game. I did have Yuri's other gear up to his EX at that point, so having his LD actually meant that I could use Yuri EX LD as synergy units to defeat the Chaos and Lufenia missions, and really that's good enough for me. So beyond the first free multi, I skipped Yuri's banners and I essentially used Yuri and my already built Gladio to really beat the contents there. The next event after that was Vayne's event, and for some reason I was extremely lucky here, so one free multi per banner, and doing both the free multis gave me a whopping 3 free FRs on Vayne. I did have all of Vayne's other gear including his BT, so essentially the only thing I was missing here was one more FR, but even with that I decided not to actually MLB his FR because my Vayne's burst is still at the base burst as well, and unfortunately I am running low on BT ingots, and if I were to green Vayne, and you really need Vayne green if you really want to use him optimally, but to me if I were to green Vayne, then I would be really beginning to be in critical levels of my BT ingots, and we do have quite a few very good BT worthy candidates coming up soon. After Vayne, we had a rerun of Kor's event, and this time Kor's FR is newly released. This is the event where I went in with tickets, primarily also because I had to use the Hunt token shop tickets as well as the tickets in the co-op shop from Yuri's event. So this is really I think the best banner for me because I really wanted to have Kor's FR, so I went in hard with tickets. I actually used tickets until I scored 2 Kor's FR, and that took me 360 tickets. I aimed for 2 because I had enough high power stones to MLB his FR from there without having to convert my existing stash of power stones to high power stones. So all in all, in this arc I spent really only 360 tickets overall. Alright, coming to the first event in Tifa's FRBT arc, which is Spiritus World of Illusion Brothers. And I'm pretty sure that this is the banner and event where the majority of the DFFOO community is hyped for, myself included. For those not aware, Tifa's role in the party has always been primarily as a single target DPS specialist. All her attacks are a single target, but they deal tremendous amounts of damage. With this event, she does receive a rework, and her HP dumps across her kit has been improved dramatically, but what really makes her significantly better is the introduction of her BT weapon. First off, a little bit about her BT aura. It does provide some pretty okay-ish party auras. They're not bad, but many other BT characters also can provide very similar auras, and these auras are Party Brave damage plus 50%, Brave damage cap up 50%, Stolen Overflows 20%, and the Help Brave and HP damage cap up by 30%, which is decent. What makes her BT extremely powerful is that while Tifa has her BT aura up, all her attacks will also chain into her signature water kick and somersault. And to emphasize again, this applies to all the attacks that she does. Water kick and somersault are each 3 HP dumps. This means that whatever attack that she does, she will follow up with a whopping 6 HP dumps after that. This is absolutely bonkers. If you look back at the current meta up to this point, most characters' regular attacks would have 4 to 6 HP dumps anyway, and Tifa herself, just by her follow-up attacks, already have that 6 HP dumps. With her rework, most of her other attacks have 6 HP dumps as well. So this means that any attack that Tifa does while she has a BT aura up will lead to roughly about 12 HP dumps or so, depending on the attack that was used. This is significantly better than every other DPS character that we have currently, and sort of propels Tifa or skyrockets Tifa up to the top of the damage charts. Tifa also gets a new FR weapon on this banner. Her force time is actually also pretty decent, but the main power behind Tifa is really her burst weapon. With regards to Tifa's force time, when she enters force time, the conditionals are pretty straightforward. Anytime that you deal a single target brave damage attack, you get 30% boost, and anytime that you deal a critical brave damage, you get another 30% boost. These two conditionals are really suited for Tifa because, as I mentioned, all her attacks are a single target anyway, so the first conditional is guaranteed with her. On top of that, Tifa actually has a buff that provides her a 100% critical hit rate up, which means that as long as that buff is up on Tifa, she is also guaranteed to fulfill the second conditional, which means that she can get a 60% FR boost every time she takes a turn. The only two things though to keep in mind with Tifa is, as I mentioned, firstly, her damage is single target, and secondly, to get the most out of her, you really need a fully invested Tifa, which includes a green BT plus weapon as well. Beyond Tifa, just want to special mention two other characters on these banners. Firstly, General Llyud, which is actually a great LD call ability, and Selfie because she provides a very nice LD debuff in her Rapture. Take note though that both of these characters aren't receiving any reworks. As far as the other characters on these two banners, Bards, Jack and 8 all actually receive reworks, but I don't mention them on this slide because their reworks are largely meant to just boost their damage output so that they are more in line in the current meta in Shinryu, otherwise their kit largely remains the same. My plans here is to really go in with gems chasing after Tifa, FR and BT. I normally never chase after any character's BT weapon, and up to this point I never actually spent 125,000 gems to PT a BT before, because I just stop at the LD PT if I have to. This time though, this might be the one banner where I break my rule, because I really like Tifa and she's extremely strong with her BT weapon at this phase of the meta. Next up is Llyud's Lost Chapters. Both Llyud and Embedded Lion on this banner will receive rework to boost their damage. On Llyud's side, the rework is a little bit less because he's a more recent C90 character. The notable thing about Llyud is the introduction of his force weapon. His force weapon is a great generalist force weapon, in a way very similar to Ursula and Iroha that was released before. When you use his force weapon, his force attack actually heals the party up to 100% of the HP damage dealt, or capped at 50% of the character's max HP. During his force time, you get a 40% boost to the force damage bonus if you end your turn while your character has a stacked buff. One easy way that you can easily fulfill this, I believe, is to use a Rydia LD call, because that call grants the 3 stack evasion buff on your entire party. I haven't tested that out yet myself, but I believe in theory that should work. Alongside that, if you also end your turn after having had your HP healed that turn, and this will also include HP regen effects, you also get a 20% bonus. So in total, Llyud's FR can actually provide you 60% boost a turn, and you can also combine this with supercharger skills such as Luna or Charlotta's S1 to give you a whopping 110% boost per turn. This is slightly better than Iroha's FR by 10% boost a turn because Iroha's force conditionals cap at 50% compared to Llyud's 60%. That being said, Llyud's is a slightly more tricky to fulfill compared to Iroha's because it does require having a stacked buff. So whether or not the 10% damage boost is worth it really depends on the fight and the party setup that you have. For myself, since I already have Iroha's FR, and by the time this banner comes around, I should have Tifa's burst weapon already. My plan is to really just skip this banner and move along. Next up, we have a raid event featuring the release of Faris FR. Faris also gets a massive rework. On top of the usual adjustment to the skills damage and the number of HP dumps to bring the characters more in line with the current meta, some notable changes for Faris' kit includes the fact that she will now start with 6 turns of a Xcaliblur overhead. She also starts with a free instant turn, and importantly, when she uses her EX, her overhead now lasts 4 turns longer than it used to be, and her whirlpool attack, which is triggered from her overhead buff after an enemy takes a turn, now deals 3 HP dumps, whereas before I believe it only does brave damage. Faris' FR is quite notable because it is an FR that dispels all enemies' buffs and also inflicts them with 8 turns of poison, a minus 70% attack, minus 70% defense, and a minus 30% max brave debuff as well. Her force conditionals are actually pretty decent, I have to say. First off, when you do any water attack, and this includes off-turn attack, you get a plus 5% bonus. Not forgetting that she already has an off-turn water attack in the form of a whirlpool. Whirlpool is water elemental, and that will trigger the 5%. Her second conditional is rather unique. It's a plus 5% when you attack an enemy for every debuff that enemy has. So assuming the target has maximum of 8 debuffs, the second conditional will give you plus 40%, and it caps out at that. Faris' FR also enchants the party with the water element, and this helps you to fulfill the first conditional. Overall, I think Faris' FR does need a little bit building around, but in that sense, so does most other characters anyway. When built properly around, you should be getting the most, which is 40% out of a second conditional, and assuming you have other characters that has often damage, one good example would be Core, where he's recently released, it will also add to the force bonus, so you will be getting the 5% bonus from Whirlpool and 5% from other characters such as Core from his preemptive strikes, or maybe even Kane with his lancets as well. Overall, she is actually pretty good. Her damage may not be top tier, but nobody is actually bringing Faris for her damage. If you are bringing Faris, it will be mainly for her utility, in the sense that she can dispel all enemies' buffs very easily, and she can also inflict a range of frame debuffs on the enemies. Whirlpool being 3 HP dumps now is a huge damage increase for her. I do think that if you have missed or skipped FRs that get bonuses on often damage, such as Reno or Core's FR, then this may be an FR that might be good for you. Agres also makes a return on this banner, and she also gets a rework. Notably, with Agres' rework, her EX now grants a free skill use, which not only significantly boosts her longevity, not forgetting also that her additional ability guarantees that her next Judgment Blade will be able to inflict paralysis. So you could, for example, use the free skill on her additional ability so that you can get a guaranteed paralysis off. On top of that, her signature confusion, which is called Faded Molly, now lasts 1 additional turn longer, So that means that she can now confuse the enemies for 2 turns via her faded melee, and you can also rely on her more frequent paralysis from Judgment Blade as well, making Aegis quite a pretty good enemy disabler. This is actually the banner where admittedly I'm having the most difficult time making a decision on. I might still pull on this banner if I get extremely lucky chasing after Tifa's FRBT, but ultimately I'm actually leaning more towards Escape. To me, I guess the idea is that I already did pull for Korra's FR, and I do have Reno's FR as well. So I'm sort of planning to just lean on those 2 FRs if I want to build an often damaged party, and I will probably just make that last until Minwoo is released on the following month. Now on the JP side of the game, I believe they did have their anniversary event roughly during this time as well, and they did have a banner featuring Ardyn with his rerun of his PT, but also a newly released FR weapon for him. Ardyn also gets a rework here, and some notable things about a rework. Firstly, his Lob Strike now also re-breaks alongside with his LD. His signature LD buff, the one that prevents him from getting KO'd, lasts now 5 turns longer than it used to, and his EX now also extends all his buffs by 1 turn. Ardyn's FR triple breaks the enemies, and he does have actually very nice conditionals in his FR that ties in very nicely with his kit. Firstly, whenever you break an enemy, you get a plus 20%. If Ardyn is the one that breaks the enemy, he gets an additional 20% for a total of 40% force bonus. If you do a melee attack, you get an additional 20% force bonus, and if Ardyn is the one that does the melee attack, he gets an additional 10% for a total of 30%. This actually means that when Ardyn does a melee attack that breaks the enemy, he gets a juicy 70% addition to the force bonus. To help him achieve this, his force also has an additional effect where the enemies now recover from break twice as fast, or in other words every 3 turns. Ardyn is a pretty self-sufficient DPS, because not only is his damage pretty respectable, this is further augmented by the fact that he can easily plus 70% his force bonus, especially since that he also has access to BT Plus and BT mode. In addition, not forgetting that he does also have the immortality gimmick going with his LD, and it lasts now 5 turns longer. This means that Ardyn does actually have the potential to solo quite a number of Shinryu stages. One popular one would actually be Dimensions End Transcendence Tier 10 Reckoning. If you have Ardyn fully built, he can solo that stage. As for my plans though, I'm also going to be skipping this banner. Nothing against Ardyn though, like I said, his damage is actually pretty respectable. For me though, I'll likely be using Tifa quite a bit since her release, and not long after this in the next arc we will also have access to another top tier DPS in the form of Renoa. If I did have the resources, especially FR, high power stones and BT ingots, I would definitely go for Ardyn, but because I am somewhat limited in those, I have sort of made a decision to instead spend them on Tifa and Renoa instead. My approach in this game is always, if I am pulling, I will be pulling in order to max the unit out and to use them, and if I'm not going to spend the BT ingots or high power stones to max it, I will actually just rather skip the banner entirely. On this part of the video, I'll sort of try to give an opinion on how I would sort of rate the characters in terms of how much value they will provide for you, in case you have limited resources and you can't afford to pull all of them or max out a number of them. Big caveat though that this is really just my opinion. I have been proven wrong a number of times before, and the big thing is always to always focus on roles that fills gaps in your roster. value can change a lot depending on your playstyle and preference and what other characters you actually have built. I think though most people will agree that out of all the characters released, Tifa will probably be the highest rated or the character that provides the most value. If you do have the resources to max her up, and again she does need full investment, especially with regards to her BT weapon, she will surpass all other DPS in your roster. The other character that I place here and as good value is actually Selfie, even though she actually doesn't get a rework on the banner. Might be a little bit of my bias coming through, but I highly rate Selfie's LD debuff. I think this is also especially true if you don't have access to the seed range LD call ability. Her LD debuff is another way to actually enable launches throughout the fight. Next up we have Ardyn, and with Ardyn I really had quite a lot of trouble rating him, so I in the end just decided to put him sort of in between the good value and role fulfillment category. His main role is really as a DPS, maybe with a little bit of utility in the fact that he can break delay enemies. I guess the only issue is that he's facing stiff competition in the form of Tifa, and upcoming he'll also be competing against Rinoa in the form of top DPS for your party. Really nothing bad against Ardyn. His damage is actually pretty good, but I guess that's just a testament to how powerful or broken Tifa and Rinoa is in terms of the DPS meters. That being said, even if you do have Tifa and Rinoa, doesn't mean that Ardyn is going to be sitting on the bench permanently. He does have the added utility that he can't actually die so long as his LD buff remains up, and he can actually solo quite a number of Shiryu stages as well, which actually means that he does have a certain value when it comes to lockout stages in particular. Whether or not to pull Ardyn when you already have Tifa or Rinoa is I think something largely due to a matter of preference and playstyle, and that's sort of the reason why I sort of place him in the middle of both the good value and role fulfillment categories. In terms of role fulfillment, first off I have Faris, and really I think Faris is actually pretty good to the point that she may be very similar to Ardyn's position here. She can very easily dispel all enemies' buffs, and she also carried that utility in her call ability as well. And the rework to her role pool is pretty massive and adds a lot to the DPS that she brings to the table. Notably also the fact that it synergizes very well with her FR, and her FR also synergizes very well with often damage dealers. This really opens up a dimension of play where we've seen recent successes in the forms of Reno's FR and Core's FR as well, so based on that I think Faris also does have the potential to achieve at least similar success. Llyud's role is an aura support character with the added utility of being able to instantly refill the other party members' EX meter. With Llyud's FR release, he also gets a role as sort of like a generalist FR setter, similar to Ursula and Iroha. In that sense, if you've missed or skipped Iroha or Ursula's FR, I think Llyud's FR is a great pickup. And if lockout stages or Dare to Defy were to return, it's always a good idea having FR with conditionals that is very easy to fulfill. So I think he does have some value there. If you've seen my recent videos as well where I sort of blitz with Anna Crow or Sid Highwind with Iroha or Ursula, you can also replace Iroha or Ursula with Llyud here and achieve the same success. Next up is Aegis, and Aegis really received some very nice changes to how her disables are applied, given the fact that she now has access to more uses of her additional ability via the free skills granted by her EX, and the fact that her Faded Molly now lasts 2 turns instead of 1 turn goes quite a long way. So if you are in need of a party member that specializes in disables, then Egress I think deserve at least some fair consideration. Lastly, on the right hand side, I did also put Immediate Lion and General Leo, but at a much smaller scale, and that's because I briefly want to mention their utility as call abilities. Immediate Lion's call provides turn deletion to all enemies, and General Leo LD call provides a 10% HP damage bonus each time you do a single target attack, which might potentially pair very nicely with Tifa. But because these are mainly tied to their LD call abilities, you usually will not want to include them in your main party. Whether or not the call abilities are worth the investment to pull for is a decision I think only you can make. So that's it for this video. Long story short, all things considered, the plan really is only to pull for Tifa using gems, and I'll likely actually be skipping everything else in this arc. At the time of making of this video though, the Square Enix livestream has not yet happened, so there is a little bit of uncertainty on what's happening on this arc. For example, whether or not we may be getting the 50+1 multi-pull, or whether or not we will be getting Ardyn, or whether Ardyn will be coming a little bit earlier in the arc is still all up for question until the live stream, and any of that may potentially change my pull plans. Anyway, I hope this video has been somewhat informative, and as always, if you enjoy the content, do leave a like, comment or subscribe, really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next pull plan video. Bye!